All right, we are live. Today is Thursday, July 28th, and this is our fortnightly design meeting. Before we get into the agenda, let's go around and do some quick introductions. I can start. I'm Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California, and I'll turn it over to Joseph.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. And Robert?
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet from Altadena, California. And Tim.
I'm Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim, and I am in Deerwood, Minnesota. Sure. So, Jen, do you want to facilitate this meeting, or should I go ahead?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So today's, welcome everybody. Today's meeting is a design UX meeting. And so we checked everyone is invited to submit issues in the backdrop forum. We have a topic every week for the upcoming meetings, and you could submit topics. There were no topics submitted there for this particular meeting, but there are, Robert has an issue which he would like to talk to us about. And I have another one which we'll get to in a minute. If anyone else has any other issues, if you're watching the live stream, put them in Zulip. We'll watch for that. If you're here in the meeting, let us know. Are you ready yet, Robert? Or
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's start with your issue. Robert wants to talk to us about issue 1602.
Okay, yeah. So issue 1602 is, which you can kind of guess from the number, is fairly old. And it addresses the problem of applying a layout to multiple paths beyond the single system path that is entered for the layout, and how to do that with wildcards or placeholders. The original issue, the issue title, was whether to use percent or star or both, and whether wildcards or placeholders were the same thing or were different. And there's been a whole bunch of discussions, and I think I'm going to summarize the discussion that percent signs have an established role as a placeholder in paths because they appear all by themselves in system paths, not in the middle of a word, for example. And asterisks have a role as a wild card in that they can appear in the middle of a word, stand for any combination of letters. And there's a well-established use of them in visibility conditions for both, well, for layouts and for blocks. And the block usage is familiar to people coming from Drupal because the same thing was used for URL path conditions in Drupal. So we've had in that issue, there's a couple of proposals of how to expand the application of layouts. And the proposal that I made, the most recent PR, is to introduce a field called URL paths that only accepts wildcards, asterisks, that behaves very much like the URL paths field in visibility conditions, and that it works for both normal paths and aliases. It doesn't behave exactly the same when it comes to issues of contexts. And I kind of want to put that aside for this discussion because there was, I put it out there about 2 weeks ago. There's been some comments have been generally favorable, but there was one open issue of how to deal with the question of ordering, of what orders you try layouts. And before I get to that issue, let me just demonstrate the current PR and how things behave. I'm going to share my screen through a window that shows this in action. So hang on. This is it. So yes. here we are looking at the layout pages. And here's the familiar listings of pages created by layouts and layouts that are overriding existing pages. And I'll draw your attention to the listing here. What's been added for these two layouts is that they have URL paths with wildcards. And here's an example with one wildcard, and here's an example with two. So this one overrides the path, the system path of node/%. And anything that has wildcard of foo/% or bar will get this layout if it has a node if it matches a path of this with a node in this placeholder. This one I want to pull up and configure because this is probably the most common use case. I have elsewhere created a view that call it view with multiple pages. Open that up. So I just created a view with 3 pages, and the first page I just gave it the name page my view/1, my view/2, my view/3, and one might think that a layout with the system path of my view/% should work for all 3 of those, but it doesn't, because they're in the system, their views created this way create 3 different exact system paths with literal 1, 2, and 3 in them. So if you wanted to use one layout on all 3 of these views, you couldn't in the current system. I mean, yes, you could clone your layouts or something like that. But what we can do with layout, well, with the URL paths field, here's my special layout. I'll call it multiple view pages layout. And I give it the system path, my view/1. So that's one of those paths. But I have a new field here, URL paths, and I'll give that my view/%. And so this layout will be used for any path that has my view/something following it. And there's some explanation in the show more link so that to remind people, use wildcards, not placeholders, and the distinction between wildcards and placeholders and normal paths, and we can add more tips and hints in here to help make it easier for people to figure out what's going on. But the big thing is, because we have this, if we now go to my view/1, which is right here, and let's see. Did I make that layout distinctly? Look to manage its blocks. Oh yeah, give it a custom block, and I'm going to put some stuff in it. There we go. Put that above the page content and save it, so that now we go to my view/1, and we'll see multiple view. This is my custom block, so this is what's telling me I'm using my custom layout on path my view/1. And now if I won't try my view/2, I get the second view with the custom layout, and my view/3 the same. And if I were to try my view/4, I should get page not found, because there is no page at my view/4. So that's how it works. Now, I mentioned there's an open issue. And what that issue is once we've introduced the URL paths in here, for a given system path, any layout potentially could apply to that system path if it's got URL paths in here. If I created URL paths, if I put, like if I took this layout and I gave it the URL path of my view/%, this would become a candidate, this layout would become a candidate for that path, and the same for any of the others. And so that raises a question: how do we let the user control the order that layouts are considered? Because in the current state, for a given system path, node/%, the only layouts considered for this path are the ones in this section, and we can reorder them within this section. But what if this guy matches? The current code in the PR just goes through the layouts in this order. So if a layout's system path happened to come alphabetically first, it would be considered first, and the user would have no nice way of overriding that.
Can you mention, I think I'm almost there. Can you provide a use case where that would happen, where the system path and the URL path would be the same? So you get two layouts for one system path?
I could not think of a reasonable use case. I mean, I could certainly come up with contrived cases, but I couldn't think of a case where, where it needed to be done that way. So the two possibilities are, one, what you're kind of alluding to is to say, we don't worry about that because it's never going to come up in practice, and we'll just tell people URL paths will be considered first in the order of their system path, and then secondly in their ordering within a given system path. Or
I'm also struggling a little bit with the visibility conditions versus URL paths now, because we have that visibility option. I think that could be a solution to this problem, right? Where if you have two that are competing, you could tell somebody, put in a visibility condition that says don't use the first one, and then it would use the second one. So that could be like a workaround or a fix for the conflicting path problem. But I think it's also, this is a very complicated problem. And I realize that we're trying to find a way to represent that, but it could be really confusing to people if you have visibility conditions that have a path with a star and URL paths that have a path with a star. Just both looking at this page with having them appear at both places, and then when trying to create a layout, like how would you decide where to put, like, is it a alternate path or is it a restriction? That could be a tough distinction for people.
Yeah, and in fact, there was some commentary to that point a little bit earlier in the discussion, and the fundamental distinction is the URL path in the layout expands the range of paths it applies to, but visibility conditions narrow the range that they apply to.
Well, yeah. Okay, so I was sort of seeing them both working both ways. So for example, this node path example you have here, if foo star is not a node page, if it's a user page, will it still work?
No, and that's the one distinction between how this URL paths, this field behaves differently from visibility conditions. And the reason for that is that the node/star system path sets up a context that is a node fulfilled from the value in that position. And so if foo star happened to match a user page, it would be supplying the user ID to something that's trying to build a node,
Yeah.
and badness happens. So the code,
So it doesn't necessarily expand it. It only expands it within the scope you've already set. So
Right.
does that also restrict it?
no. I mean, adding a URL path entry can only increase the number of paths it applies to, but it may not increase it as much as you might think.
Well, if node percent is already all nodes, and you can't ever load any pages that aren't nodes, then adding URL paths would have to restrict it
No,
because it's not going to be able to get anything else. And so it's already 100% of node options.
right.
Right.
And URL path doesn't. So this particular example, which is I didn't put together for this demo, is sort of contrived to
Okay.
To explore this issue. I mean, to explore, just to verify that we're not going to try to match things where the contexts won't match. If you actually had this set up, putting in foo/star bar/star wouldn't buy you anything here, because it would already, because this system path already matches nodes.
Yeah.
But if you put in, but for example, my view/star, if you had a node whose path started with my view, or because its alias, was my view/something, this path wouldn't, or this URL path would not match this layout to that alias, because the contexts don't match.
Yeah. So I think that maybe we just remove that URL paths field as soon as a context is added. If adding one isn't going to get you anything, and that might make it so that, like, for all standalone pages, you can add any number of standalone pages, and for all patterns, you can add any pattern. But for something that has a required context, if you want a URL path, that's going to be a visibility condition, and not, because it's not going to expand, it's only going to restrict if you already have a context.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That might be one way to help that confusion a little bit.
Yeah. Again, I can think of a use case. I can think of contrived use cases, but not where you'd want to be able to do that, but not real ones.
Yeah.
If you created, if let's say I've got a module that has, my/module/% node as the system path, then, no, I guess it'd be my node/%, because, well, that's a question of whether, if we want to match placeholders in different positions. But I'm now thinking what you just said is saying, let's just not allow it if the path has placeholders, and then we don't have to deal with a huge amount of confusion.
Yeah. I think that might help.
I like that. Yeah. Because again, I think the most common use case is this multiple view type layout,
Yep.
and that's where it would work. Cool.
Yeah, or even just multiple layouts too. Like if you had I don't know, you wanted to have like a landing 1, landing 2, and they had like all the same blocks except for like one, you could put a visibility condition on your block and use the same layout for both.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I was thinking like specifically for backedupcms.org, I want to use this on the layouts, themes, and modules pages. And those are all just layouts, but they all have the same layout. I can't do it now.
Let me float one other idea that I sort of considered, which is to say, to let the user kind of click the option, select an option don't try to create contexts if they don't match. So for example, suppose you wanted to use the same layout on a user page and a node page. And certainly user/star and node/star would create completely different contexts. But if I'm not making use of those contexts in any way, I don't care. And so we could also,
like, even if the person building the layout isn't making use of those contexts, the like system rendering inside is just to get stuff like page titles and metadata and stuff.
okay.
So that could still be hard. I do think like it is technically possible to do something where you could like load the context and match the context, the required context, and fall back somehow. But I think that might not be necessary. I think just because we are getting into the sort of edge cases here where I think it would be good if we could get something that was better and then try it for a while and then be like, okay, what can we not do now? Rather than being like, let's try and imagine everything possible from the beginning, just because I think that we are getting into a lot of scenarios where I'm not really sure how much people are actually going to need this.
Yeah, so from that point of view, limiting it to system paths without placeholders is nice, because it means we can get that out there and have it work, and then take our time figuring out if we ever want to do anything different about placeholders.
Yeah. I also think it makes it a little easier in the display of this page too, where like all of the standalone pages sort of go together at the top, and those will have like a sort of a different configuration than all of the layout overrides at the bottom. Like it won't include the URL paths, and it'll be clear that the two are different because now they have like different features. So before they're sort of the same configure form. So yeah, I don't know. I think it might help a little.
Yep.
I do think this might be something that we have to like try and then like iterate and then like next release try again, because I think there is going to be a lot of confusion with the URL paths in both places on the page, like in the layout column and in the visibility condition column. That could be confusing, and we might need to add some more help or better labels or something, but I can't imagine. I have no idea how to fix that. I think we just need to try it and see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. I think I don't know how we're gonna figure out how to restrict that field on the edit form. We do a lot of like Ajax in order to add the recognized context to the page. So maybe we could do something with that action where if the context is recognized, we remove it.
No, I'm confident about that, because
Okay.
There's already Ajax that adjusts forms based on what's in the path. If you put in a path that doesn't exist, it says this will create a page, and if you put in a path that does exist, it says this will override, and so it should be really easy to just add to the Ajax to check whether it's got a % in it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I appreciate your confidence. I'm like, that sounds hard.
Famous last words.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, sounds good. I will stop sharing and make a note in the issue. And great.
That's a tricky one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Tim, I don't know if you want to change your name.
I do. I absolutely want to change my name. I'm glad we could be of help, Robert.
Oh, absolutely.
Meaning Jen. I'll just say I'm still a little bit confused by this issue, but I appreciate that it's giving me the ability to do more things with fewer layouts, which seems to be the main. right? Because you can get more done without having to create multiple layouts for really similar or the same situation. And that seems to be a bit of a problem with our layout system, is that sometimes it requires multiple layouts where you would think you would need them. Anyways, so I look forward to that. Any other comments on this issue, or should we move on? Okay. So go ahead, Joseph.
I have a question about, so there were,
Oh.
Is it possible for us to say, specify, this is slightly not on topic, but if it requires a context for a block on the page, could you say, get it from the context directly or get it from a relationship? Like, what would be an example of this?
You
Like,
could like manually add a relationship, like take a standalone layout and like add node 6 or something to that page. But we could have the URL paths disappear at that point too in the configuration. So it wouldn't be auto detected, but it would still be addition of context.
okay. I was thinking more like a fallback for a context. Like if the context is not directly available, then get it from the author or from the current user.
Like a views contextual filter thing where it might have interesting. Right. I don't think we have any of that support in layouts, but I wonder what it would do in views using that. I think in views, I don't think the context is available to layout. I think it's only available to the view.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a good question though.
I guess we could go ahead with the current solution and then remove restrictions later if we come up with a good way of doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that pause indicate a break in the discussion, or no, Joseph?
Yeah, that was all I had.
Okay, good. So the next issue on our agenda, I added a little bit. It's an issue I just opened. It's issue 5699. And I just opened this in the last week as a core issue, but I'm still trying to probe whether my understanding of one, what's possible, and two, of the benefits of this are correct before. What the use case I had here was working with paragraphs. And I have a page, and then I'm adding paragraphs. And one of the paragraphs is like a subsection, and it needs a subtitle. So I go to add a subtitle field, or a title field to my paragraph. And I'm recently been trying to think more semantic about my markup. For I guess largely for accessibility reasons. In the past, I think in a case like this, I would have sort of a subtitle CSS, and I would just theme whatever the subtitle field is to look like what essentially I guess would be an H3. As I think more about it, I really should be using H3s for things that are looking like H3s for screen readers. And so I assumed that there would be a way for me to make this title sort of an H2 or an H3, but I couldn't find anything in core. And then I went looking, and I had a difficulty finding something in Contrib until I was pointed at the right answer. The field wrappers, I guess, the field wrappers module seems to be the working module we have, which lets you add an HTML element wrapper around a field. But first of all, is just sort of my understanding about the accessibility implications of this correct? It seems to me that if we want to encourage semantic markup, that the ability to add tags to fields or add am I using my language right? This would be adding an HTML element, wouldn't that be, to a field? That has some, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's a lot of ways to do this that don't involve the user interface, right? Like any number of field templates
Right.
that all use
Exactly.
divs. So the question here is like, how much of this we want to move into the user interface? And so we're weighing the difference of like the complexity of the field system versus the flexibility of adding different options. There are a couple of good contrib options. I haven't heard of field wrappers, but Fences does the same thing and lets you choose an HTML element. I don't know if that
Yes.
exists for Backdrop.
It-
Yeah.
Just quickly, it does, but it's not stable and there's no release.
Okay.
So go ahead.
You can also do that with Display Suite, although it's a bit more work to set up.
Okay.
But yeah, I think also this will vary depending on the site too, as to whether you are gonna even want heading tags around your fields. Because there are a lot of sites that all of those various heading levels get like inserted into the body field. So you have like one long stream and maybe all of the other stuff shouldn't be headings. It is, actually just strong tags, or maybe they go into blocks in the sidebar or something in different ways. So yeah, I don't know. I think it would be something would be good for us to keep an eye on to see, what people are doing with their websites in the future. This will also be a pattern thing, right? Where like maybe this year all of the content's in the body field and next year all the content's in different fields or however. But yeah, I think it would be good to have a core issue and see who weighs in on it as to whether they need that feature.
I think paragraphs is the obvious example where I can think of where it's helpful. In the body field, you can actually add through the WYSIWYG, you can set up so that editors can add H3s. But I mean, this seemed like, as I was doing it, it seemed like an obvious thing that needed to be there, because part of the benefit of paragraphs is we're building components and taking away that control from editors and sort of structuring it for them, removing that choice from them. And, partly to make the sys site more predictable and structured. Yet, when we take away the ability to add, or when we add the paragraph, now we lose the ability to sort of make it an H3 without. Now I'm perfectly happy with a contrib module for my use case, as long as I was able to figure. It actually took me a little while to figure, and some help to find the contrib module. It was not easy. I took a forum post, a Zulu post, and a core issue before I was finally directed to the right module, which solved this problem for me, which is maybe a different issue. But anyways, that got me thinking that, maybe this should be in core.
Yeah.
But it's not urgent in my view. I wanted to see if other people thought that was important.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of my backdrop sites that use paragraphs or field collections or similar things. And I think those don't use headings. I think they're all just like repeating the same element on a page that has a heading. And so the page is responsible for it and the content isn't related. But I do have a Drupal 8.9 website that uses paragraphs, and it has one paragraph type that's like a collection of other paragraph types.
Mm-hmm.
And the collection has a heading tag on it, so an editor would have to put in like an H2 into that tag, and that tag is H2 in the template file. And then inside the collection of paragraphs there's another kind of paragraph, and that one has a heading that's an H3. And so we did create all of that stuff, but we did it using the template files for those fields. So there's like a heading field on both of those paragraph bundles, but on one paragraph bundle it was an H2, on the other paragraph bundle it was an H3, so we just used two different templates for it. So yeah, I think there is a need for that. Like I can see the structure of it existing, but I don't know if that use case is general enough that it belongs in core or not. And I think that probably the more people use paragraphs, that would increase. So yeah, I would like to see where that
Sure.
issue goes.
Yeah, I'm happy to just leave the issue open. I'm happy now to just have found field wrappers as a suitable solution. Okay. Well, that was a quick discussion. There's nothing more to say so far. Just actually, I think two people have commented in and both sort of said they thought that maybe this should be something in core, but it was very mild, and we definitely need more discussion. So I'm going to give this a needs more feedback tag. Anyways, does anybody have any other issues? Okay. Well, I was going to say we could cut our meeting short, but it's not actually that short. We're approaching the next meeting anyway. So if there are no other design UX,
I have a documentation related issue.
Sure.
So I went through the doc site and the main website, and on the main website, I deleted all the documentation notes that were on the doc site and redirected them. And then on the doc site, I found a couple of documentation notes that were like not documentation. They were like the Bug Squad team page and stuff like that we had on the main site. And so I deleted those from the documentation site and redirected them to the main site. So I think we might have gotten everything so that there's only one page in one place. So we'll see if that works out or not.
Okay, that's more of an announcement than a question.
Yes. Well, I mean, not a question, just like letting Robert know, especially because he's working on the doc site. In case you're wondering what's going on over there,
Perfect.
I redirected a bunch of traffic.
Cool.
So.
Thank you. Okay, well, yeah, let's just wrap things up then if nobody's got anything else. Okay, bye everyone. We'll end the live stream.